This is Mr. Melendez, and I'll be providing you a read aloud of the document African Americans in Government. So let's begin. Document 1. Radical members of the first legislature after the war, South Carolina. In South Carolina, newly empowered African Americans who outnumbered whites were able to elect a black majority to the State House of Representatives. These black representatives were able to be part of every voting session during the Reconstruction era except for one session. Although many whites within the South mostly pointed to South Carolina as an example of political corruption, the new state assembly passed many laws including funding for public education, securing the right to vote for all men, and protecting civil rights. Corruption, dishonest conduct by those in power, example, taking a bribe. Document 2, from an article in Harper's Weekly, Gathering the Dead and Wounded. An article written in Harper's Weekly shows some grim results of a terrorist attack on African American citizen in the town of Colfax, Louisiana in April 1873. White Southerners associated with the Democratic Party began a series of harassment and bullying in hope to remove white Republican officials from their government positions. These forms of harassment and bullying were race baiting, economic pressure, not providing funds for their cause, and threats of violence. They also intimidated African American Republicans through violence and economic pressure. In Colfax, freedmen who feared these white Democrats seized the town government by forming a blockade around the town, not allowing people to leave or enter the town. This blockade held for 3 weeks until they were overpowered by the White League, a paramilitary group that targeted black and white Republicans in Louisiana. 70 African Americans and 2 whites were murdered. Most of the murdered African Americans had already surrendered when they were killed. This massacre that happened in Colfax was one of many hundreds of attacks against black voters and politicians during the Reconstruction era. Race baiting, making verbal attacks against members of a racial group. Paramilitary, organized in a way that looks like a military force. Let's go over the questions. Directions. Answer the following questions based on the above documents. Type your answers inside the text box. Number 1. Is this document evidence of an intent to expand or limit the freedom of African Americans? Question number 2. Which amendment is addressed by this document? And question number 3. How does this document support or oppose the intent of the 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendment? And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This is the read aloud of the document. You can pause or rewind as much as you want as you go over the document. Also, don't forget that there would be an example of the document with answers provided to you in Google Classroom. This was also shared during the mini lesson for today's lesson. All right, but it's also attached to your Google assignment as a reference to use to help you with this particular document. Anyway, this is the end of the read aloud. This is Mr. Melendez. I am punching out. Please have a wonderful day.